Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Lisa Love, and this is the video on 10 evolutionary groups, how humans evolve as understood by Alice Bailey. And in this particular video, we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into groups 1 and 2. As a reminder, these 10 evolutionary groups are general divisions attempting to show how humans progress from their baser animal instincts, where they are focused mainly on surviving and procreating, to the point where they know who they are as spiritual human beings and live accordingly. Now, Bailey says that humans of all 10 groups are said to exist among us. The shift from one evolutionary group to another depends on the focus of their consciousness, which is often determined by the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical focus of anybody's individual life. So let's look now at where that spiritual, mental, emotional, physical focus is for groups 1 and 2. As a reminder, groups 1 and 2 are part of the groups that have to do with what I call becoming human. Bailey calls becoming an integrated personality and being on the path of individuation. What that means is they are focused primarily on the realm of the 5 senses. That means looking out through the 5 senses, through what they see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, and trying to get an understanding of the world only through what those 5 senses convey to them. They are also gaining sufficient mastery or manipulation of the body, emotions, and mind for purpose of exploiting the outer world of the 5 senses. Now, at groups 1 and 2, they have very little mastery of the outer world, very little ability to get what they want in the outer world. But by group 6, they are masters of this and excel at being able to get what they want in the world of the 5 senses. So, as a reminder from our previous video where we had an introduction, the evolutionary names associated with group 1 and 2, and Bailey herself gives this, is Lemurian. Now, Lemurian is not supposed to be correlated with some Lemurian race back there in ancient times. It's rather a state of consciousness. And that's really important to understand if you go through Alice Bailey's books, or you will get really confused. Because most of humanity is Atlantean consciousness. They didn't die in a flood somewhere thousands of years ago. Rather, almost all humanity has Atlantean consciousness, whereas a few humanity has Lemurian consciousness. So let's just forget about Lemuria and Atlantis and a race of people and focus on consciousness from this point forward. So that way you will not get confused. So we also see that those that are within groups 1 and 2, I'll get my little pointer here. Groups 1 and 2 are Lemurian, are primarily focused on the physical plane. I've put one little smidgen going on to the emotional plane, a little bit of emotional development, but primarily Lemurians are coordinating their physical bodies and have initial emotional expression, which is still fairly primitive. Now, does it actually go only up to this subplane of the 7th subplane, we could say, of the emotional plane? There are 7 subplanes in each one of these planes. That's my theory. It could go up this way as well into the 6th subplane, but Bailey doesn't say this part. This is my theory based on the correlations with her book, but this is pretty close to where groups 1 and 2 would be on her step-by-step model here. That box again is to kind of show you the different subplanes, pretty much the same as the circle there. Now, it's interesting to note that most of humanity in the Bailey books is said to be in groups 3, 4, and 5. That's where we get that idea that they're primarily Atlantean consciousness. There's some of the references there if you want to go look it up yourself. But Bailey also says that those in group 1 are still found on our planet. Though she implies that the numbers are fairly low, somewhere in the low thousands or maybe within the hundreds. Of group 1, Bailey states that, quote, their intelligence is of such a low order and their awareness of themselves and of life is so dim and nebulous that only the lowest forms of human existence come into this category. And there's where we can find the reference for that. Where these people might live, we really don't know. And, you know, all I can do is go on what she says and then give you some of my own ideas, maybe a few thousand, maybe a few hundred only on the planet. We'll describe what these groups are like, and then you can have your own theories of where they might be. Bailey implies that they might be seen in the slums. We'll see that when we get to a quote on group 2 versus group 1. So my idea is that they are probably institutionalized if they are living at this level, and you'll see why as we start to describe group 1. Bailey says, well, here it is right here, that those in group 1 may be found in the slums of the world trying to find a way to exist. And they're associated, as we already said, with something called Lemurian consciousness. So this particular group, group 1, has to do with the stage of recapitulation when we know who we are as individuals. Remember, groups 1 through 6 are on the path of individuation, which starts with this process when we are infants and we're trying to coordinate our physical bodies and understand that we are separate individuals. And I've shown this video before in a previous video that I've put together here, but I'm going to show it again here so that you can get an understanding, because this video is really crucial for group 1. We move out of group 1 when we have finally individualized. So we can say that group 1 is primarily infancy through about 18 months.
Who's that in the mirror?
This is known as a mirror self-recognition test, which may offer clues about the development of self-awareness. Without alerting the child, a mark is placed on its forehead.
Baby.
Usually, a baby younger than about 18 months doesn't make the connection between itself and the person in the mirror. The child may even look behind the mirror for the stranger it sees.
Hi. Hi.
But by about 18 months, there's a change in the child's awareness. Now it notices the red dot and the link between itself and the image in the mirror.
It's not ready.
What's not red?
My this. My head.
Over the next few years, children go on to fulfill their human birthright, constructing an increasingly sophisticated sense of self. They will have a rich and complex life of the mind, and a sense of being the central characters in their own dramas.
So it's obvious in this video that the children at the end are beyond the group 1 idea when they first see themselves with the rouge dot on their head. But this gives you a sense of where group 1 is like. So if there are group 1 adults in the world, they're going to have difficulty with physical coordination. They're going to have a lot of difficulty in really understanding who they are. Or maybe they do understand who they are, but it's just very, very difficult for them to get by without any help. So it looks like I'm going to be stuck here, trying to get to the next video. There we go. Next slide, I should say. All right. So what are some points about group 1 and 2 Lemurian? First of all, as we already said, there are a few people in especially group 1, numbering in the low thousands. The everyday consciousness is focused on the subsistence level of survival and the struggle to find food, shelter, clothing, and ways to relieve their sexual urges. Remember, we understand where we're at by looking at where the contents of our consciousness is throughout our day. If we are primarily focused only on finding food, clothing, shelter, and just simply we have a sexual urge, we want to release it, then that's pretty much where our consciousness is trapped. People in groups 1 and 2 are also said to have very little understanding of the workings of the world around them and may even remain isolated from the rest of the world, possibly institutionalized because of that. And this is an important thing to understand. Bailey says that those in this group are not to be associated with Indigenous people. Why? Because she says that the vast majority of Indigenous people do not belong within this group. You would have to have an Indigenous group that basically didn't have any of the consciousness that starts to evolve at groups 3, 4, and 5. And as you'll see, as we learn more about those groups, we really can't say that that's the case. We have to say that most Indigenous people are probably where almost all of us are in groups 3, 4, and 5 on the planet. And as you get to understand what these groups are like, that's going to make sense to you. But there are still within certain Indigenous tribes, some that were in groups 6, 7, we'll get to that when you understand the groups more. There are some fairly evolved spiritual beings found within Indigenous groups. So we can't equate an Indigenous group with a state of consciousness. Now, group 1 Lemurians specifically is at the early stages of individualization, like I just showed you in that video on the Rouge test. They are attempting to coordinate their physical bodies, and from there to understand that they are separate individuals. That's the coordination of the physical body. And they're focused on basic survival needs, and they're often dependent upon others to help them get those basic survival needs met. Group 2 Lemurian, let's look at that, starting with what Bailey has to say. Bailey believes members of group 2 still exist on our planet as well, and she says that their numbers are probably within the several thousands. And there's the reference for that. As for what they're like, Bailey states that people in group 2 are aware of life and physical sensation, but are slow, inert, and inarticulate, which would probably mean that they don't have much mastery of the world around them. They don't have much mastery of language. It's difficult for them to express themselves and express their feelings. And they are said to be bewildered by their environment and by events. Bailey goes on to say that those in group 2 have no sense of time or purpose, and for that reason, they cannot really make plans. They have difficulty connecting up things with the past and the future. They live in a kind of moment of now, but it's not the same kind of now that we really want to talk about when we get to advanced groups here. They're pretty much in the moment because they can't really plan a future, and they can't really learn a lot from their past yet. They're said to have little skill at much of anything, but they can, quote, dig and carry under direction. They can basically do what they're told. And apparently they eat, sleep, and procreate, following the natural instincts of the human body, have childlike beliefs regarding those in charge, and are motivated mainly by safety and the gratification of their basic needs. All of this makes it difficult for them to respond to any, quote, emotional and mental training and culture. Finally, we are told that they remain confused by events around them, usually because they're not able to put these events into any kind of meaningful context. And there are some of your references. So when I was focusing on this for this video, and also for the chapters in my book, Becoming Human, on this, I was trying to get a sense of what this all would look like. And my sense is we're talking about a little child. Because a little child is not very articulate yet. A little child has childlike beliefs, is reliant primarily on those in charge, has to pretty much be told what to do, They can't really regulate a plan for themselves yet. And so to me, this pretty well fit. They get confused about events around them. They rely on their parents to try and tell them the meaning of things. And even then they can have a hard time grasping it. Again, they're emotionally naive with childlike emotions and overly dependent. They have an instinctual use of mind. They're impulsive and they're often lost about how to cope. And they have confused sexual impulses. They just, in a way, they're very focused in their body. They feel something pleasurable and they'll express it. I saw this with my son when he was very, very small. You know, most children do that. They are just natural with their bodies and natural with touching their bodies, etc., until they are conditioned by their cultures to stop that and how to behave in public type of a thing. So that can be a really wonderful kind of thing, except it makes it difficult if they stay at that level to function in our world. And here is a video that I found that I thought might reveal some of this to you. I looked a lot for a video that might express this. And I have to really say, this is Gary Sinise playing this role here, the man with the dark hat. And this is John Lithgow. And this is from the book of Mice and Men that was turned into a movie a few times. And John Lithgow, I feel, did a really marvelous job of playing this part. And I'm sure he was inspired by watching small children. And you'll see how he expresses that as he plays Lenny. This is Lenny, who is a grown man who is really in kind of a group 2 consciousness. And therefore he has to constantly be taken care of by the character that Gary Sinise is playing.
Okay, listen, this time don't forget. We went into Lemurian Readies and they give us work cards and bus
George,
tickets.
I remember that now. George, I ain't got mine. I must have lost it.
You never had none. I got both of them. You think I'd let you carry your own work card?
Well, I thought I had it in my own pocket.
What'd you take out of that pocket?
There's nothing in the pocket, George.
I know it ain't. You got it in your hand. Now, what you got in your hand?
George, that's in my mouth. But I didn't kill it, George. Honest, I found it there.
Give it here.
George, leave me have it.
Give it here. What do you want with a dead mouse, anyway?
I was just petting it with the fingers while we was walking along.
Yeah, well, you ain't petting no mice when you walk with me. You gonna give me that mouse, or am I gonna have to sock you? Come on. Blubbering like a baby, a big guy like you. Lenny, I ain't taking it away from meanness. That mouse ain't fresh, Lenny. Get another mouse that's fresh. I'll let you keep him a little while.
Yeah, I don't know where there is no other mouse. The lady used to give me some, but that lady ain't here no more.
Lady? Don't you even remember who that lady was? That's your Aunt Clara. She stopped giving them to you. You was always killing them by petting them too hard. Tell you what I'll do. First chance I get, I'll get you a puppy. Huh? That'd be better than mice. You could pet them harder. Okay?
And it's going to do that again where it's not going to let me get out real easily. So I'll go to my last slide here and share that with you. So this is a summary then of groups 1 and 2, Lemurian consciousness. And what we can see from this video is that there are few said to exist at this level. And if they do exist, especially at group 1, they're likely to be institutionalized, because even group 2, you can see in that of mice and men video clip, needed a lot of care to be able to function in the world. Now, groups 1 and 2 are recapitulated. That means we go through those steps again from infancy up to when we are small children. And you might want to say that that's about ages maybe 3, 4, maybe 5. And I gave you a tentative idea of how those that are still in group 2 on our planet might look in the Of Mice and Men video. And so you notice the kind of naivete that the character Lenny had. You notice how George had to take care of Lenny. You notice how Lenny didn't really remember who gave him the mouse. Lenny didn't have the ability to kind of future plan where that next mouse might come from. Lenny had a hard time dealing with the loss of the mouse, had a hard time conceiving that the mouse was really dead. You know, so you can just have a tremendous amount of empathy too. You know, it's really important when we go through these groups that we don't look at them as lesser or better. They're just developmental stages. And, you know, to judge a stage would be to like judge ourselves because we were infants, or we were 3 or 4 years old, or 12 or 18. You know, we just want to look at these different stages of growth and see them with compassion and help them to the best of our ability move forward. So if there are those with groups 1 and 2 consciousness still on our planet, we have to have a lot of compassion for them. And if you want to watch that movie of Mice and Men, especially the one with Gary Sinise and John Lithgow playing the characters of Lenny and George, I really recommend it, because you get such a sense of compassion that George has as he tries to take care of Lenny, and it's just really inspiring. Now, another thing to understand is we may move back into one of these groups if we have sufficient trauma or possibly even damage to our brain. Like that Chutes and Ladders game, we may take a step back, either because we've had a physical trauma, maybe too much war, too much PTSD, too much starvation, too much difficult circumstances around us may force us to collapse. And even the brain may start to not function in the ways that it had before. And especially if we have actual physical damage to the brain. So those are some important things for you to consider. And I hope you carry these ideas forward into your own life, and that you start to look for ideas of your own or videotapes of your own. And I'm happy to have you share them with me, and I'll be happy to share them with others if I think they're really insightful. So thank you so much for joining in this particular class. I'll see you next time when we're going to focus on group 3.